What? Uh-huh. Ooh. All right, we're going to speed through these. Howdy, viewer. Alrighty. What happened today? Published 3 hours ago, California legislators passed redistricting plans to put Heidi-ho, neighborino. California legislatures passed their redistricting plans to put a Democratic-drawn map before voters. On Thursday, California lawmakers passed a new congressional map designed to create 5 winnable Democratic seats, which California voters must approve in a special election in November, requiring Newsom's signature to meet ballot deadlines. Using their legislative supermajority, Democrats must pass the map by a 2/3 margin to bypass California's voter-approved independent redistricting commission, but only voters can override the commission's map. Republicans immediately sued and vowed to fight the plan. Can't see my screen. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Republicans immediately sued and vowed to fight the plan, but the California Supreme Court rejected an initial legal challenge late Wednesday as GOP leaders pledged to campaign against the power grab. You're like 4 seconds behind me. That's funny, because I clicked the button, and then about 4 seconds later, he said, "There goes." Welcome, second viewer. The fight signals a broader national tit-for-tat over maps, with former President Barack Obama calling California's response smart and measured, and California Governor Gavin Newsom saying, "Yes, we'll fight fire with fire." Oh boy. It's not a good picture of this guy. A dramatic plan to reshape California's congressional districts to favor Democrats will appear before voters this November after state lawmakers voted Thursday to place the redistricting proposal on the ballot to reshape their districts for the next 3 elections, specifically in the new proposal. The votes in the state assembly and Senate capped a frenetic week of debate on the map as lawmakers faced a deadline to call the special election on the proposal, which will appear as Proposition 50. Prop 50, Saving Democracy. The November 4th vote is now set to be the marquee event in a nationwide showdown between Democratic and Republican states over political district lines that could help determine control of Congress in 2026. I hope it's a showdown because the Democrats need to get their showdown shit together. What was it? New York governor? New York Times, breaking news. The Texas House passed redistricting map intended to help the GOP win 5 more U.S. House seats in the midterm elections. New York Governor Kathy Hochul replies, game on. Let's do it. Let's see. How many House seats does New York have? Check. New York has 26 seats. Wow, that's a lot less than I thought. California has 52. What are the populations? California has about 40 million people, and New York has about 20 million people. So that makes sense. 52 as opposed to 26, half. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. New York House seats by party. New York has 19 Democrat seats and 7 Republican seats. So there's 7 to win there. Cool. The votes in the state assembly and Senate captive frenetic. We read that. The November 4th vote is now set to be the marquee event in a nationwide showdown between Dem and Republican states over political district lines that could help determine the control of Congress in 2026. When all things are equal, when we're all playing by the same set of rules, there's no question that the Republican Party will be the minority party in the House of Representatives next year, said Governor Gavin Newsom at the signing ceremony late Thursday. The Assembly approved the measure going before voters. Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8 on a 57-20 vote. Assemblymember Jasmeet Bains, who's running for Congress in a competitive Central Valley seat, was the only Democrat to vote against the plan. 2 other Democrats, Don Addis of Morro Bay and Alex Lee of San Jose, did not vote. Newsom first publicly floated the idea of redrawing the state's congressional map in July after President Donald Trump called on Republicans in Texas to pass new maps adding more GOP-friendly seats. Some Democrats in the legislature initially expressed reservations about the idea. California voters gave congressional line-drawing powers to an independent commission in 2010, and the state's current maps are drawn to reflect community input, not to maximize partisan advantage. So, California population by party registration. Would that be on Ballotpedia? Party affiliation of mayors, voter registration statistics. Historical voter registration statistics, registration by county, by age range, congressional district, state assembly. Complete report. And that's 15 million, 20 million, 21 million. Okay. Eligible voters, February 10th, 2025, 27 million in California, 23 million registered. Of those 23 million, 10 million were Democrats, 5.5 million were Republican, and 5 million were no party preference, 1.5 million were other. Oops. So 45% Dem, damn it, 25% Republican. California House seats by party. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 seats out of 52. What's that? 9 seats out of 52. 17%. 17% of the representatives in California's 17% of California representatives in the U.S. House are Republican. 25% registration are Republican. Huh. So they're actually underrepresented. Interesting. Okay. But after weeks of internal discussion between state leaders and Democrats in California's congressional delegation, the party and allied advocacy groups united behind the plan. The measure going before voters, Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8, would enact a map favoring Democrats for the 2026, 28, and 30 elections. Today we give every Californian the power to say no to Donald Trump's power grab, and say yes to our people, to our state, and to our democracy. The legislature also approved 2 additional bills that Newsom signed on Thursday, one to fund the November election, and another outlining the new House district lines. Lawmakers are expected to vote next week on a bill that would trigger the new maps only if another state moves forward with mid-decade redistricting. Lawmakers vote next week on a bill that would trigger the new maps only if another state moves forward with mid-decade redistricting. I believe Texas just did. Okay, we'll get there next. You move forward fighting fire with fire. What happens? You burn it all down, Republican Assembly Leader James Gallagher said. Okay, James Gallagher. And in this case, it affects our most fundamental American principle, representation. California's proposed map threatens 5 incumbent Republican Congress members. In Northern California, Republican reps Doug LaMalfa and Kevin Kiley could see their redistricts redrawn to include more Democratic voters in Sonoma and Sacramento, respectively. With more than half of their 9-member congressional delegation in jeopardy. Is that what we did? Yeah, okay. Republicans in both chambers of the state legislature uniformly opposed the redistricting. Yeah. But lacking the votes, they had few options to halt the plan. California's legislature only needs a majority of members present to establish a quorum, preventing Republicans from staging a walkout similar to the one by Democrats in Texas. The state Supreme Court also rejected a legal challenge brought by Republican lawmakers over the expedited procedure used to rush the bills to a vote. In the Senate, an amendment proposed by Senator Suzette Martinez Valladares, a Republican from Santa Clarita, would prevent any member of the legislature who supports ACA 8 from running for office for 10 years. If this body insists on moving forward with stripping power away from the voter-approved redistricting commission, then the very least we can do is we owe Californians meaningful safeguards against corruption. The November election will cost in the low hundreds of millions of dollars, according to a legislative staff analysis. In 2021, the state allocated nearly $280 million to counties and the Secretary of State's office to run a special election on the recall of Newsom. The November election will cost in the low... we did that one already. In some counties, the November election will include local measures and races in addition to the redistricting question. Santa Clara County supervisors have placed a measure on the ballot asking South Bay voters to approve an increase in the county's sales tax to help offset federal budget cuts enacted by Trump and Republicans in Congress. Actually, Texas population by voter registration. Not by county. Statewide total. Precincts. By party. Registered voters 18 million in Texas out of 22 million voting age population. Wait. Yeah. Texas voter registration by party. Democrats 8 million, Republicans 6 million, 6.5 million out of 17.5 million registered voters. So Texas House seats by party. $25 Republicans, 12 Democrats. All right, so the Democrats are underrepresented. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we got that going for us. Texas Republicans approved Trump-backed congressional map to protect party's majority. On Wednesday, the Republican-controlled Texas House approved a new congressional district map intended to increase the GOP's representation by adding 5 seats to the U.S. House of Representatives. By adding 5 GOP seats. The map, urged by President Trump, follows a mid-decade revision approach enabled by the 2019 Supreme Court ruling that allows partisan gerrymandering. I wonder what 2019 Supreme Court. Rucco versus Common Cause. It's a landmark case of the United States Supreme Court concerning partisan gerrymandering. The court ruled that while partisan gerrymandering may be incompatible with democratic principles, the federal courts cannot review such allegations as they present non-justiciable political questions. Justiciability concerns the limits upon legal issues over which a court can exercise its judicial authority. Includes, but is not limited to, the concept of standing. Okay. So questions of partisan gerrymandering are outside the jurisdiction of federal courts. The case was one of the three heard in the 2018 term dealing with issues related to partisan gerrymandering used in the districting plans of states. It was combined with Rucco versus League of Women Voters of North Carolina, and its decision included the court's judgment on Lamone versus Benesek, a partisan gerrymandering case from Maryland. The 5-4 decision, divided among ideological lines, left in place North Carolina's congressional districts, which favored Republican Party, and Maryland's congressional districts, which favored the Democratic Party. So it was literally a case about partisan gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court said, well, we can't rule on that, so you guys figure it out yourself. Okay. Democrats protested the Texas Republicans' push for a new congressional map by fleeing the state for 2 weeks to delay the vote, and upon returning were subject to round-the-clock police monitoring to ensure attendance. The map passed on an 88-52 party line vote. Republican Representative Todd Hunter stated the plan improves GOP political performance and complies with the Voting Rights Act, while Democrats called it a violation. I'd love to hear his explanation for why it complies with the Voting Rights Act. The approval triggers a likely national redistricting battle as Democrats vow legal challenges and California prepares its own new map, adding Democrat-leaning districts. Is the stream okay? It's giving me a warning. It says the current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. Wow, significantly lower. Oh, and now it's okay. But it keeps bouncing back to that. Okay. Stand by. Let me see if I'm on a hard wire or not. Okay, I think I am. Okay, cool. Let's see. Wait, what did that say? California Governor Newsom, likely eyeing a 2028 White House run, is using Donald Trump's all-cap style. Hell yeah, I would vote for Newsom.
What's going on with those posts on X that are clearly trolling the president? What? Can you just talk about that? Is that like a strategy?
I don't know. I hope it's a wake-up call to the President of the United States. I'm sort of following his example. If you've got issues with what I'm putting out, you sure as hell should have concerns about what he's putting out as president.
Hell yeah. The Lone Star State's GOP lawmakers are poised to send new congressional maps to Republican Governor Greg Abbott on August 21st that Trump and his allies hope will give them a strategic advantage in holding onto their majority in the U.S. House of Reps. But the fight in Austin has spread beyond the state's borders and created significant uncertainty about who will be in position to govern during the second half of the Trump administration and after the next race for the White House. Game on, New York Governor Kathy Hochul wrote August 20th on Twitter. She's one of several Democratic leaders considering their own state steps, like the Texas Republicans, to redraw congressional district borders inside their state. 5 takeaways. Republicans have the upper hand if the redistricting war expands. States typically redo their congressional boundaries for voters every decade, specifically in the 2 years that follow a new census. But Trump has encouraged redistricting to happen ahead of the 2026 House elections. The tendency of the party in the White House to lose seats in the U.S. House during the congressional elections that happen in the midterms are his motivation. The recent examples include 1994, 2010, 2018, and 2022 political cycles. Trump and the GOP are hoping to break that trend and increase their 219 to 212 U.S. House majority through states with Republican legislatures that can draw congressional maps. By contrast, many Democratic states have passed laws and constitutional amendments creating independent commissions to draw their congressional district maps instead of politicians. That's part of why states such as Missouri and Indiana have discussed redistricting for Republican advantage, but the Democratic stronghold of Washington has ruled it out completely. Additionally, Ohio needs to redraw its own congressional maps under a constitutionally mandated process that would happen regardless of today's political climate, and Florida has created a special committee to redraw congressional maps. Taken together, that means that there are 3 high-population states actively pursuing Republican seats, and so far California is the only major state likely to redistrict for Democrats ahead of 2026. What's happening this week in Texas won't be the final say on whether the maps are permanent. That's for the courts to decide, though fights like this can take years to work their way through the system. Both Dems and Republicans previewed their legal arguments during the Texas legislature's August 20th House floor debate that ended in the House's approval of the Republican-favored new maps. Democratic lawmakers accused their GOP colleagues of packing Hispanic voters into some districts and cracking or diluting their representation. They also asked Republicans whether they drew maps based on voters' Hispanic ethnicity, since race-based gerrymandering is still illegal. Texas State Republican Representative Todd Hunter, the Republican authority of the bill that changes the maps, explained that an outside law firm drew the maps, not members of the legislature or their in-house staff. Which law firm drew the Texas redistrict maps? It's been reported that Texas Republicans hired the Public Interest Legal Foundation. That's what the AI says. It's a real thing. Okay. Firmly right wing. Phil drew the new Texas maps. What is it? Google searching must have quotation marks. On April 2nd, 2025, the Tarrant County Commissioners in Texas court approved an agreement with the Public Interest Legal Foundation to provide legal guidance and consulting on possible changes to the commissioners' district boundaries for the 2026 primary and general elections. Proposed redistricting map options. On June 3rd, the Tarrant County Commissioners Court approved the order to establish new precinct boundaries depicted on map option 7. So there's precedent. Yeah, it probably was them. In a 3-2 party line vote, Republicans on Tarrant County Commissioners Court approved a $250,000 contract with PILF, a leading Washington, D.C. based anti-voting law firm that the county previously hired to oversee the mid-decade redistricting project that is now being challenged in court. PILF then brought in Adam Kincaid, who Politico recently described as the GOP's map-making expert in the states where Republicans control redistricting. All right, PILF is doing it. Public Interest Legal Foundation. Americans haven't historically liked it when politicians draw maps in their favor, but they may support the practice when it benefits the party they agree with. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, one of the names floated for vice president in 2024, got his name out there when he hosted There's no video at the moment. Can you hear me? Illinois governor got his name out there when he hosted the Texas Dems who fled their state for nearly 2 weeks. Yes, I am. Okay, cool. Thank you, Fafa. Fafa. Check. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. Okay, I'm getting it on mine. Cool. Maybe it was the bitrate thing that I'm experiencing. Maybe it dropped out momentarily. Why is my bitrate so low? That'll be something I troubleshoot tomorrow. Another new face is... Yeah. I mean, probably, but I haven't changed anything. Speakers, mic, output. My bitrate is set to the right bitrate. I think my internet's just slow for whatever reason. Or not slow, but maybe my computer's updating or something. Oh, hello, third viewer. We got three people up in here. Okay. What? Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump are all involved. Former President Barack Obama posted on X that the attempt to redraw districts in Texas was an assault on democracy and praised Texas Democrats. Now he's endorsed Newsom's plan to redistrict California's congressional maps in retaliation. Boogie, oogie, oogie, oogie. Former Vice President Kamala Harris also called Collier while she stayed in the legislature. You really are inspiring so many people, and I just want you to know that you are among those who history will reveal to have been heroes of this moment. So you just stay strong and do what you're doing. Harris ruled out a run for governor of her home state of California in 2026, leaving Americans to wonder whether she'll run for president in 2028. Yeah, it's probably the bitrate. It's tanking hard. Let me, hold on. Do I have Wi-Fi on? I might drop out for a minute. I'm going to kill Wi-Fi. The hard line should take over. We still there? Okay. We're still there. But bit rates are still not steady. Okay. Alrighty. Let's continue. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know what I think the bitrate is just related to the quality of the video portion of it, because the video takes the most data. So like if you try to do the 1080p, it might get a little blurry if my bitrate is low on the upload. But I'm not sure. I don't know. U.S. Department of Justice to back off. Yes, that was super fucking cool. How many moons does the planet with the most moons have? Jupiter has, no, Saturn 274? No. How many moons does Saturn have? $274 moons over Saturn. The one in the middle of the rings, yes. That's a lot of moons. And some of them are going the other way. How do we get out of this image? Oh, I guess I just closed the tab. Okay, the U.S. Department of Justice does not plan to target software developers that create decentralized platforms for transmitting cryptocurrencies without criminal intent. I mean, that seems fair, right? Without criminal intent? But what if they don't have criminal intent, but they end up benefiting from criminal actions? Daphnis around Saturn. Daphnis, Saturn. Oh, wow. Is it in the rings? Okay. Thanks, TikTok. It's a cool visual. Do we have a real image of it? Here's an actual video. Oh, wow. Or image, I guess. Cassini. Yeah, that is fucking dope. Imagine a society that lived on there. Like if you lived on that moon, it'd be like to look up and see the rings coming off. See the shadow that you're casting on the rings. That's super fucking cool. Yeah. Yeah. Watch it splash, ripple. Um, Marking the latest sign of the U.S. government's changing views on crypto, Acting Assistant Attorney General Matthew Galliotti of the DOJ's Criminal Division said the department will move away from bringing charges over failure to register as a money transmitter business. Okay, shouldn't they register as a money transmitter business? Our view is that merely writing code without ill intent is not a crime. So I guess it's a crime to move money in large amounts without registering as a money transmitter business. I don't know what a money transmitter business is. Money services business is a legal term used by financial regulators to describe businesses that transmit or convert money. It was created to encompass more than just banks, which normally provide these services, to include non-bank financial institutions. Money transfer services or payment instruments. Oh, okay, like Clover also. Money transmitters in the U.S. are part of a larger group of entities called money service businesses. Under federal law, businesses are required to register for a money transmitter license where their activity falls within the state definition of a money transmitter. So I don't know if, I mean, if you wrote a cryptocurrency, would you be considered a money transmitter business, or would that be for the exchanges where you can exchange the currencies? I don't know. Money transmitters, such as Western Union and payment apps like Venmo, need to be licensed and follow certain rules for vetting customers and reporting suspicious activity to prevent money laundering. Such rules have become a flashpoint for the crypto sector, especially for decentralized exchanges, which often say they have no visibility or oversight over transactions on their platforms. A jury earlier this month found a co-founder of Tornado Cash, a firm which makes cryptocurrency transactions harder to track, guilty of a conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitter business. Anti-corruption advocates say such firms make it easier to launder illicit funds. I don't know. I feel like that's a hard one. Because the point of crypto, isn't it to be decentralized? So if you're going to track it, it kind of defeats the purpose. Critics of the case said the co-founder, Roman Storm, merely created the computer code. The jury in the case deadlocked over whether he was guilty of money laundering and sanctions evasion. These charges were brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan under the Biden administration. The DOJ under Republican President Donald Trump, whose family has been building a crypto business, has dramatically shifted its approach to the crypto sector. The Justice Department has disbanded its crypto enforcement team, and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, a civil regulator, has walked away from a number of cases against crypto firms and executives. See, that's not good. So is there going to be no oversight at all? I guess that's the plan. The European Union aims to apply lower U.S. tariffs to car exports retroactively. tariffs to exports. Smells like a bribe, exactly. Oh, export duties, okay. It's exactly what it says it is. So if we're increasing tariffs to incentivize our companies to manufacture here in the States, and if they increase tariffs on exports, no, they decrease tariffs on exports, means it's cheaper to export. It's incentivizing exporting. Washington will reduce the current 27.5% U.S. tariffs on cars and parts, which are burdensome for European car makers. Sefcovic stated the European Commission plans to propose legislation by the end of the month for tariff cuts. The U.S. will lower auto tariffs to 15% if the EU introduces legislation to reduce its industrial tariffs. All right, we got to get through these quick. I got to read this Federalist Paper. U.S. business activity picks up in August. Factories lead the way. U.S. business activity picked up pace in August, led by a resurgent manufacturing sector that saw the strongest growth in orders in 18 months, a purchasing manager's survey showed on Thursday. U.S. business activity picked up pace in August. S&P Global's flash U.S. Composite PMI Output Index, which tracks the manufacturing and services sectors, increased to 55.4 this month, the highest level since December, from 55.1 in July. A reading above 50 indicates expansion in the private sector. The data are consistent with the economy expanding at a 2.5% annualized rate, up from the average 1.3% expansion seen over the last 2 quarters of the year. The improvement came largely from the manufacturing sector, where the flash PMI surged to 53.3, the highest since May 2022, from 49.8 in July, and defying economists' expectations for a second month of contraction. Manufacturing received a bump from new order activity at the highest since February 2024. Companies across both manufacturing and service sectors collectively reported the steepest rise in input prices since May and the second largest increase since January 2023. The report said. Rates of increase accelerated in both sectors. The survey's measure of prices charged by businesses for goods and services rose to a 3-year high of 59.3, in an indication that companies are increasingly passing along the costs from higher tariffs to consumers. Employment also improved, the survey showed. The composite employment index for both manufacturing and services rose to 52.8, the highest since January, from 51.5 in July. Okay. Supreme Court lets Trump administration cut $783 million of research funding in anti-DEI push. The decision enables the administration to cancel numerous NIH grants despite ongoing legal challenges from 16 Democratic state attorneys general and health advocacy groups. 16 Democratic state attorneys general and health advocacy groups opposed the funding cuts, arguing they harm public health research. U.S. District Judge William Young found the cancellations arbitrary and discriminatory, but the Supreme Court disagreed, stating spending decisions should not face judicial second-guessing. This fucking headline. Breaking. Supreme Court delivers huge win for President Trump in 5-4 decision. 100%fedup.com. Supreme Court hands down some incomprehensible gobbledygook about canceled federal grants. Okay. Federal judge rules Trump appointee Alina Habba is unlawfully serving as U.S. attorney. Federal judge ruled that Trump appointee Alina Habba has been unlawfully serving as the top federal prosecutor in New Jersey after her 120-day term as interim U.S. attorney expired in July. Judge Matthew Brand said he is putting his order on hold pending an appeal. Brand's decision comes in response to a filing on behalf of 2 New Jersey defendants who face a trial on federal drug trafficking charges, arguing that Habba did not have the authority to prosecute the case. Wow, that's crazy. Imagine arguing that you shouldn't be convicted, you shouldn't take this to court because the judge is not a real judge. Or the judge is unlawfully serving. The judge is committing a crime by presiding over my case. Okay. Oh yeah, Trump plans executive order on flag burning. President Donald Trump plans to issue an executive order to direct the Department of Justice to review cases of flag burning for possible charges. The goal of the order is to impose penalties for flag burning without violating a 1989 Supreme Court ruling that deemed it protected speech. So how are you going to impose penalties if it's protected speech? Unless it's like you burned the flag and then threw it on a building and the building started burning, and then you could say it was arson. Senator Josh Hawley introduced legislation that would add an additional year to federal sentences for crimes involving flag burning. Or is it like if you're out committing a crime? Oh, that's what it is for protesters. They're going to convict the protesters of like violence and then slap on an additional year because they were also burning a flag. Efforts to amend the Constitution to prohibit flag burning have repeatedly failed, needing a 2/3 majority in Congress. Oh, there is only right-leaning coverage on this. I guess we'll see. If he signs the executive order, we'll read through that order. Okay. Let's do this. Written on November 23rd, 1787 by James Madison. Madison, right? That's James Madison. Oops. Not there. Here. Yes. James Madison. Let's see how he writes. Is he as dense as Hamilton? For the New York Packet. Best Windows Peak in the game? Oh, Widow's Peak. Windows Peak. Holy shit. Uh, yep. Man, he really does have a Widow's Peak. A fierce one. Yep. Okay. The same subject continued. The Union is a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. Ooh, that one's longer. To the people of the state of New York. Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. The friend of popular governments never finds himself so much alarmed for their character and fate as when he contemplates their propensity to this dangerous vice. He will not fail, therefore, to set a due value on any plan which, without violating the principles to which he is attached, provides a proper cure for it. The instability, injustice, and confusion introduced into the public councils have, in truth, been the mortal diseases under which popular governments have everywhere perished, as they continue to be the favorite and fruitful topics from which the adversaries to liberty derive their most specious declamations. The valuable improvements made by the American constitutions on the popular models, both ancient and modern, cannot certainly be too much admired, but it would be unwarrantable partiality to contend that they have as effectually obviated the danger on this side as was wished and expected. Complaints are everywhere heard from our most considerate and virtuous citizens, equally the friends of public and private faith and of public and personal liberty, that our governments are too unstable, that the public good is disregarded in the conflicts of rival parties, and that measures are too often decided, not according to the rules of justice and the rights of the minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. However anxiously we may wish that these complaints had no foundation, the evidence of known facts will not permit us to deny that they are in some degree true. It will be found, indeed, a candid review of our situation, that some of the distresses under which we labor have been erroneously charged on the operation of our governments, but it will be found at the same time that other causes will not alone account for many of our heaviest misfortunes, and particularly for that prevailing and increasing distrust of public engagements and alarm for private rights, which are echoed from one end of the continent to the other. These must be chiefly, if not wholly, effects of the unsteadiness and injustice with which a factious spirit has tainted our public administrations. Oh boy, Madison's worse than Hamilton. It was like 3 sentences. By a faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. By a faction, I understand a number of citizens who are united and actual. Oh, faction. Okay, so he's defining faction. It's a number of citizens who are united by some common cause or passion, who don't care about the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. So a well-constructed union will break factions and the violence and control the violence of factions. The instability, injustice, and confusion that's introduced into the public councils have plagued popular governments and caused them to perish. These instabilities, injustices, and confusions are very fruitful for the adversaries of liberty. The constitutions, the American constitutions, the Constitution, the one they wrote, constitutions, why plural? Okay, the constitutions of all the states that they adopted following independence. Okay. The several American constitutions that were formed after independence improved on the popular models of democracy, or I guess the popular models of constitutions. But it's important to understand that they have not clearly defeated the danger of factions. I should be writing this down. There are two methods of curing the mischiefs of faction. The one by removing its causes, and the other by controlling its effects. There are again two methods of removing the causes of faction. The one by destroying the liberty which is essential to its existence. The other by giving to every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, and the same interests. Interesting. It could never be more truly said than of the first remedy that it was worse than the disease. It could never be more truly said than of the first remedy that it was worse than the disease. That it was worse than the disease. Destroying liberty to destroy factions is worse than the factions themselves. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire, an element without which it instantly expires. But it could not be less folly to abolish liberty, which is essential to political life, because it nourishes faction, than it would be to wish the annihilation of air, which is essential to animal life, because it imparts to fire its destructive agency. The second expedient is as impracticable as the first would be unwise. As long as the reason of man continues fallible, and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed. As long as the connection subsists between his reason and his self-love, his opinions and his passions will have a reciprocal influence on each other, and the former will be objects to which the latter will attach themselves. The diversity in the faculties of men from which the rights of property originate is not less an insuperable obstacle to a uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government. From the protection of different and unequal faculties of acquiring property, the possession of different degrees and kinds of property immediately results. And from the influence of these on the sentiments and views of the respective proprietors ensues a division of the society into different interests and parties. The latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere brought into different degrees of activity according to the different circumstances of civil society. A zeal for different opinions concerning religion, concerning government, and many other points, as well of speculation as of practice, an attachment to different leaders ambitiously contending for preeminence and power, or to persons of other descriptions whose fortunes have been interesting to the human passions, have, in turn, divided mankind into parties, inflamed them with mutual animosity, and rendered them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. So strong is this propensity of mankind to fall into mutual animosities, that where no substantial occasion presents itself, the most frivolous and fanciful distinctions have been sufficient to kindle their unfriendly passions and excite their most violent conflicts. But the most common and durable source of factions has been the various and unequal distribution of property. Those who hold and those who are without property have ever formed distinct interests in society. Those who are creditors and those who are debtors fall under a like discrimination. A landed interest, a manufacturing interest, Did the stream die? Are we back? Did the stream die? Ooh, 4 viewers. Okay, cool. Did it buffer? It says, YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. But now it might be okay. It lags. Okay. A landed interest. The regulation of these various and interfering interests forms the principal task of modern legislation and involves the spirit of party and faction in the necessary and ordinary operations of the government. No man is allowed to be a judge in his own cause, because his interest would certainly bias his judgment and, not improbably, corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judges and parties at the same time. Yet what are many of the most important acts of legislation, but so many judicial determinations, not indeed concerning the rights of single persons, but concerning the rights of large bodies of citizens? And what are the different classes of legislators, but advocates and parties to the causes which they determine? Is a law proposed concerning private debts? It is a question to which the creditors are parties on one side and debtors on the other. Justice ought to hold the balance between them. Yet the parties are, and must be, themselves the judges, and the most numerous party, or in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail. Shall domestic manufactures be encouraged, and in what degree by restrictions on foreign manufacturers? Are questions which would be differently decided by the landed and the manufacturing classes, and probably by neither, with a sole regard to justice. Stand by. And the public good. The apportionment of taxes on the various descriptions of property is an act which seems to require the most exact impartiality. Yet there is, perhaps, no legislative act in which greater opportunity and temptation are given to a predominant party to trample on the rules of justice. Every shilling with which they overburden the inferior number is a shilling saved to their own pockets. It is in vain to say that enlightened statesmen will be able to adjust these clashing interests and render them all subservient to the public good. Enlightened statesmen will not always be at the helm, nor in many cases can such an adjustment be made at all without taking into view indirect and remote considerations, which will rarely prevail over the immediate interest which one party may find in disregarding the rights of another or the good of the whole. The inference to which we are brought is that the causes of faction cannot be removed, and that the relief is only to be sought in the means of controlling its effects. If a faction consists of less than a majority, relief is supplied by the Republican principle, which enables the majority to defeat its sinister views by regular vote. It may clog the administration, it may convulse the society, but it will be unable to execute and mask its violence under the forms of the Constitution. When a majority is included in a faction, the form of popular government, on the other hand, enables it to sacrifice its ruling passion or interest, both the public good and the rights of other citizens. Sacrifice to its ruling passion or interest both the public good and the rights of other citizens. To secure the public good and private rights against the danger of such a faction, and at the same time preserve the spirit and form of popular government, is then the great object to which our inquiries are directed. Let me add that it is the great desideratum? Desideratum? What does it mean? And then how do we say it? Yeah. Madison uses the word to describe something that is greatly desired or needed. The ideal goal or urgent necessity is the great urgent necessity by which this form of government can be rescued from the opprobrium under which it has so long labored, and be recommended to the esteem and adoption of mankind. Opprobrium describes the shame or disgrace that has historically been associated with popular forms of government, especially pure democracies. It's the great need by which this form of government can be rescued from the shame under which it has so long labored, and be recommended to the esteem and adoption of mankind.
Desideratum.
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 Okay. Opprobrium.
Opprobrium.
Opprobrium. Okay. Yeah. By what means? So let's see. Desideratum is the great need. It's the great thing which is needed. Rescued from the opprobrium, the shame. By what means is this object attainable? Evidently by one of two only. Either the existence of the same passion or interest in a majority at the same time must be prevented, or the majority having such coexistent passion or interest must be rendered, by their number and local situation, unable to concert and carry into effort schemes of oppression. If the impulse and the opportunity be suffered to coincide, we well know that neither moral nor religious motives can be relied on as an adequate control. They are not found to be such on the injustice and violence of individuals, and lose their efficacy in proportion to the number combined together, that is, in proportion as their efficacy becomes needful. From this view of the subject, it may be concluded that a pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person, can admit of no cure for the mischiefs of faction. A common passion of interest will, in almost every case, be felt by a majority of the whole. A communication and concert result from the form of government itself, and there is nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice the weaker party or an obnoxious individual. Hence it is that such democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Theoretic politicians who have patronized this species of government have erroneously supposed that by reducing mankind to a perfect equality in their political rights, they would, at the same time, be perfectly equalized and assimilated in their possessions, their opinions, and their passions. A republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place, opens a different prospect, and promises the cure for which we are seeking. Let us examine the points in which it varies from pure democracy, and we shall comprehend both the nature of the cure and the efficacy which it must derive from the union. The two great points of difference between a democracy and a republic are, first, the delegation of the government, in the latter to a small number of citizens elected by the rest, their representatives. Secondly, the greater number of citizens and greater sphere of country over which the latter may be extended. The effect of the first difference is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations. Under such a regulation, it may well happen that the public voice, pronounced by the representatives of the people, will be more consonant to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves convened for the purpose. On the other hand, the effect may be inverted. Men of factious tempers, of local prejudices, or of sinister designs may, by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means, first obtain the suffrages, and then betray the interests of the people. The question resulting is, whether small or extensive republics are more favorable to the election of proper guardians of the public weal, and it is clearly the latter by two obvious considerations. Weal refers, W-E-A-L, refers to the common good or general welfare of the society. The public common good. Clearly decided in favor of the latter by two obvious considerations. In the first place, it is to be remarked that, however small the republic may be, the representatives must be raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals of a few, and that... Jesus. It is to be remarked that, however small the republic may be, the representatives must be raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals of a few, and that, however large it may be, they must be limited to a certain number in order to guard against the confusion of a multitude. Hence, the number of representatives in the two cases not being in proportion to that of the two constituents and being proportionally greater in the small republic, it follows that, if the proportion of fit characters be not less in the large than in the small republic, the former will present a greater option and consequently a greater probability of a fit choice. In the next place, as each representative will be chosen by a greater number of citizens in the large than in the small republic, it will be more difficult for unworthy candidates to practice with success the vicious arts by which elections are too often carried, and the suffrages of the people, being more free, will be more likely to center in men who possess the most attractive merit and the most diffusive and established characters. It must be confessed that in this, as in most other cases, there is a mean on both sides of which inconveniences will be found to lie. By enlarging too much the number of electors, you render the representatives too little acquainted with their local circumstances and lesser interests, as by reducing it too much, you render him unduly attached to these and too little fit to comprehend and pursue great and national objects. The federal constitution forms a happy combination in this respect, the great and aggregate interests being referred to the national, the local in particular to the state legislatures. The other point of difference is the greater number of citizens and extent of territory which may be brought within the compass of republican than of democratic government, and it is this circumstance principally which renders factious combinations less to be dreaded in the former than in the latter. The smaller the society, the fewer probably will be stand by. I think we're dropping out. Okay, we're back. Extend the sphere and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. You make it less probable that a majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens, or if such a common motive exists, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and to act in unison with each other. Besides other impediments, it may be remarked that, where there is a consciousness of unjust or dishonorable purposes, communication is always checked by distrust in proportion to the number whose concurrence is necessary. Hence, it clearly appears that the same advantage which a republic has over a democracy in controlling the effects of faction is enjoyed by a large over a small republic, is enjoyed by the Union over the states composing it. Does the advantage consist in the substitution of representatives whose enlightened views and virtuous sentiments render them superior to local prejudices and schemes of injustice? It will not be denied that the representation of the Union will be most likely to possess these requisite endowments. It will not be denied that the representation of the Union will be most likely to possess these requisite endowments. Does it consist in the greater security afforded by a greater variety of parties against the event of any one party being able to outnumber and oppress the rest? In an equal degree, does the increased variety of parties comprised within the Union increase this security? Does it, in fine, consist in the greater obstacles opposed to the concert and accomplishment of the secret wishes of an unjust and interested majority? Here, again, the extent of the Union gives it the most palpable advantage. The influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. A religious sect may degenerate into a political faction in a part of the Confederacy, but the variety of sects dispersed over the entire face of it must secure the national councils against any danger from that source. A rage for paper money, or for an abolition of debts, for an equal division of property, or for any other improper or wicked project will be less apt to pervade the whole body of the Union than a particular member of it, in the same proportion as such a malady is more likely to taint a particular county or district than an entire state. In the extent and proper structure of the Union, therefore, we behold a Republican remedy for the diseases most incident to Republican government. And, according to the degree of pleasure and pride we feel in being Republicans, ought to be our zeal in cherishing the spirit and supporting the character of Federalists. Publius. Okay, that one was rough, but there was a lot of good stuff in there. But it's time for bed. Tomorrow, Federalist number 11. I think I want to get through (11, 12, 13, 14). I'm going to keep reading, I think, tomorrow, but I also want to go back and try and summarize these all to actually understand what they're saying. So I got little bits and pieces, but I have to actually sit and read through it line by line, put it all together, write each sentence in modern English, or I guess lay English. Less collegiate English. Simpler English. There we go. Simpler. That's the idea. All right. Good night, y'all. Thanks for joining. We'll see you tomorrow night.